Okay, we're doing explanation of crime CMY3701 study unit 2.3. Okay, psychological explanation for criminal behavior. Psychological positivism. Learning outcomes. After working through the study unit, you should be able to explain the psychodynamic perspective, explain the behavioral perspective, explain the cognitive perspective, list and discuss the critical factors relating to the three perspectives. We've got a diagram below. There is our diagram. Okay, we're moving to introduction. This study unit examines theories that explain criminal behavior primarily based on psychological theories in terms of the offender's personality attributes. Psychological theorists argue that criminal behavior originates in the personality of the offender rather than their biology or their situational environmental factors. Psychological explanation of crime and criminal behavior have their basis in the predestined actor model of crime and criminal behavior. The causes of crime are dysfunctional, abnormal emotional adjustment, or deviant personality traits formed during the period of childhood development and early socialization. As a result of these factors, the individual is, to all intents and purposes, destined to become a criminal. The only way to avoid the destiny is to identify the predisposing condition and provide some form of psychiatric intervention that will remove these factors and enable the individual to become a normal, law-abiding citizen. I have to repeat this introduction. The study unit examined theories that explain criminal behavior primarily based on psychological theories in terms of the offender's personality attributes. Psychological theories argue that criminal behavior originates in the personality of the offender rather than their biological or their situational environment factors. Psychological explanation of crime and criminal behavior have their basis in the predestined actor model of crime and criminal behavior. The causes of crime are dysfunctional, abnormal emotional adjustments, or deviant personality traits formed during the period of child development and early socialization. As a result of these factors, the individual is, to all intents and purposes, destined to become a criminal. The only way to avoid that destiny is to identify the predisposing conditions and provide some form of psychiatric intervention that will remove these factors and enable the individual to become a normal, law-abiding citizen. Psychological theories have been generally classified as a falling into one of the three categories: psychodynamic or psychoanalytic perspective, behavioral perspective, cognitive perspective. Definitions of key concept: behavioral perspective focuses primarily on the overt behavior, its observable antecedents and consequences rather than upon internal processes. Behaviorists stresses social learning and behavior modeling as the key to criminality. Cognitive approach. Cognitive refer to the attitudes, beliefs, values, and thoughts that the people maintain regarding the social environment, human nature, and themselves. Cognitive behavioral approaches emphasis on the role that cognitive appraisal and other internal processes contribute in violent acts. Pleasure principle. According to Freud, a theory in which ID-dominated people are generally motivated to increase their personal pleasure with the lack of appreciating the consequences of their action. Cognitive perspective is concerned with mental processes such as perception, memory, decision making, and problem solving. Psychodynamic or psychoanalytic perspective takes the view unconscious level and which holds the key to understanding behavior. This perspective is viewed as branch of psychology and asserts that an individual personality is controlled by one's unconscious mental process that develop early in the years of childhood. Psychoanalysis focus on early childhood experience and its effect on personality. Social learning theory maintains that people learn behavior from one another either through observation, imitation, or reinforcement of an act that goes unpunished. The theory has been defined as a bridge between behaviorist and cognitive learning theories because it incorporates attention, memory, motivation. Behavioral theories examine the learning process that led to criminal behavior. Psychodynamic or psychoanalytic perspective. Sigmund Freud, the Australian psychiatrist, was the founder of psychodynamic or psychoanalytic psychology, and this has since remained a prominent school within psychological theory. The focus of the psychodynamic theories of criminal behavior is mainly one of the development of the inner self psyche in infancy. The assumption of this perspective is that motivation for criminal behavior is entrenched in an individual psychodynamic structure and development. Freud contributed immensely to the theories of the development of personality and emphasized that it is the result of social experience. Although Freud wrote little on crime as such, his theories about the development of the personality have been used by some of his fellows to explain how and why individuals engage in antisocial or criminal acts. According to psychodynamic theories, humans will continually be disposed to aggressive impulse, and the likelihood of the commission of violent crimes if these impulses are not properly managed. The psychoanalytic theories of Freud and his colleagues introduced the concept of unconscious and emphasize that the fact that all human behavior is motivated and deliberate. Psychodynamic theories examine unconscious behaviors that are believed to cause criminal behavior. Behavioral theories examine the learning process that led to criminal behavior. Cognitive theories look at how thought process, e.g., thinking and moral judgment, influence one's. The psychodynamic perspective is based on the belief that thought and emotions are significant causes of behavior. In other words, the basic cause of criminal behavior is seated within the individual. Considerable emphasis is placed on early childhood because early life experience have a significant influence on the child's future behavior. We focus on Freud's personality theory next. Freud's personality theory. Freud's best known contribution to psychology is his emphasis on the unconscious and the part of unconscious plays in people's mental functioning. According to Freud, the personality is divided into three parts that are always in conflict with one another: ID, ego, superego, as summarized in the figure 2.3.2 below. Okay, we've got the figure here, 2.3.2, and then we move to at birth. We are all ID, that is, our personality consists of primitive impulses and unconscious drives. It has no sense of time, order, or morals. The ID continually seeks pleasure, is extremely charged with energy, and remains unconscious throughout life. Freud holds that the human personality contains three-part structure. Freud started from the position that the individual are biological provided with specific pleasure-seeking and destructive tendencies. These basic drives or instincts, such as to eat, to avoid pain, and to obtain sexual pleasure, derive from the unconscious part of the mind and are expressed in an energy which Freud referred to as the identity. The identity requires instant gratification without concern for the right of others and is only drive and is the only drive. An uncontrolled libido will result in rape and other deviation behaviors. Ego. Ego is that segment of personality which is unconscious and rational. It progresses as the child starts to understand that he or she is separate from other individuals and objects in the environment. The ego acts as a mediator between the unconscious impulses stemming from the ID and the demands of the superego. The second structure of ego, which develops early in life when a child begins to learn that his or her wishes cannot be instant gratified. The ego is the conscious state of personality and operates on the reality principle, which orientates the person towards the real world in which he or she lives. The ego considers the practical and conventional according to prevailing social norms. The ego has the task of balancing the demands of the identity against the inhibition imposed by the third structure of the personality, the superego, in the individual response to external influences. Superego is a social conscience that represents society's social restrictions and morality. As individuals interact with others, they are automatically subject to external parental authority. The child identifies with parent figures and internalizes parental and societal values into their own personality. Therefore, the superego emerges. The superego is the force of self-criticism and conscience. It is the moral aspect of our personality, and we use the superego to judge our own and other people's behavior. The superego is divided into two parts: conscious and ego ideal. Conscious tells us what is wrong and right. It forces the ego to control the identity and directs the individual towards moral, acceptable behavior, ego ideal, which may not be pleasurable. Freud, Castle, and Bastien believe the identity, the ego, and the superego are constantly at odds with each other and therefore create struggles known as intra-psycho conflict. In addition, Freud believed the following. Freud believes that people, we are all carry with us a need that play a major role to our emotional attachments of our childhood, which ultimately guides us on how we view our interpersonal relationship in future. Further, Siegel maintains that the superego develops as a result of incorporating personality, moral standards, and values of the significant others. The superego is mostly responsible for the moral aspect of the individual personality, meaning the superego is divided into two parts, that is, the conscious and the ego ideal. The superego is responsible for conscientizing a person or differentiating between what is wrong, what is right or wrong. This process indirectly forces the ego to control the ID and directs the individual into adopting acceptable values, norms, and behavior. Explanation of criminal behavior. Brown et al. Contended that conflict, particularly during childhood, needs to be resolved appropriately. Unresolved conflicts will increase the likelihood of problem behavior at a later years because many of these conflicts involve a person's most threatening memories, thoughts, and impulses that are usually kept out of consciousness by what Freud called defense mechanism. Defense mechanism can be adaptive in that they help people to function in society. But if people rely too heavily on them, they may lead to certain problems. These problems can range from seemingly irrational symptoms of anxiety, worry, and guilt to substance abuse and interpersonal conflict, physical dysfunction, and even severe mental disorder. Indeed, Freud believed that the type, number, and intensity of psych conflict and the defense mechanism required to deal with shape the personality and in extreme cases led to mental disorder. Displacement is another defense mechanism that can help to explain some instances of child or spouse abuse. The abuser may be too afraid to direct anger toward a boss or other authority figure and may instead turn on a helpless child or submissive spouse. An abused spouse, in turn, may not be able to respond appropriately to the abuser's aggression and may take out on the child. Although Freud did not actually address the psychodynamic roots of criminal behavior, he believed that many criminals are driven by the unconscious desire to be punished by society for behaviors that precede their crimes, so that guilt comes not as a result of criminal behavior but as its unconscious cause. According to Freud, sublimation is healthy response to guilt. In such instances, the individual channels his or her drives into socially approved activities. Sigmund Freud believed that offenders have overdeveloped superegos that lead to guilt, anxiety, and consequent desire for punishment. Freud suggests that violence in all its forms is a display of the discharge of aggressive energy. The psychoanalytical perspective of the view that if violent crime is to be controlled, the human animal must be provided with multiple and appropriate channels for catharsis. Freud believed that the majority of criminals have a sense of guilt before they commit a crime. Therefore, wrongdoing is not the result of guilt but of motive. That is, criminal behavior may be the result of an overdeveloped superego that causes a powerful sense of guilt in the individual. In contrast to Freud, August Acon believed that criminality is the result of an underdeveloped superego. August Acon's research on delinquent boys in Lily Alal supported the view that the criminal is a weak ego, a weak or absent superego, and a strong identity. Icon was psychoanalytic analyst who administered an institute for juvenile delinquents. He observed that many incarcerated youths had underdeveloped superegos, and he attributed their criminality to expression of an unregulated ID. Icon suggested that the lack of parental love or supervision resulted in the underdevelopment of the child superego, and this in turn led to his or her subsequent delinquency. According to Icon, the parents of these children were either absent or unloving, so that the child failed to form the intimate attachment necessary for the proper development of the superegos. He argued that repeat your offenders he argued that repeat young offenders had a predisposition for criminal behavior because of their inability to control the identity demands for instant gratification. This was exacerbated by the failure of the superego to develop sufficient strength to generate respect for others and a sense of right and wrong. Having little or no superego development, criminals are said to lack a conscious and to have no empathy for others. A weak ego can easily be influenced by peer pressure and other social forces, and this too increases the likelihood of criminal behavior. These insights lead us to evaluate the psychoanalytic perspective on criminal behavior. I will stop here for now. Okay, let's continue. Evaluation of psychoanalytic perspective on criminal behavior. Critics of psychoanalytic perspective on criminal behavior are of the view that the theories are unstable and that the psychoanalytic explanation of behavior are made after the behavior has occurred and rely heavily on interpretations of unconscious motivations. Asserts that psychoanalytic work on crime often takes the form of case studies of offenders. In these studies, psychiatrists are generally aware that a crime has been committed before they commence with examining the patient. The examination is done through a process is referred as a biographic reconstruction. This process allows them to demonstrate that certain traits and aspects of the patient's background led to the crime. Regit, Torres, and Garrett concluded that these case studies do not constitute an indication of the psychoanalytic explanation of crime because the evidence found might be an indication of a dormant capacity for delinquents for any normal individual. In essence, psychoanalytic explanation claim that to be fully socialized, young children must internalize societal rules. Psychoanalysis also claims that problems in the parent-child relation can lead to criminal behavior in later life, and that some crimes result from earlier conflict which are stored in the unconscious mind. However, few modern psychologists make direct use of Freudian concepts simply because when subjected to research, these concepts have been found to be without firm basis. However, some of the ideas put forward by psychoanalysis have been highly influential in, in directing the attention of researchers to impact of early life experiences, especially parenting, on later delinquent and criminality. This leads us to examine the behavior explanation for crime. Behavior perspective originating in the late 18th. Behavior theory gained attention in the 20th century through the works of psychologist B.F. Skinner. Behavior theory is the basis for behavior modification, a treatment approach used in the institutionalized and non-institutionalized settings for behavior modification. The approach is mainly focused on observable behavior, which contrasts with the traditional psychoanalytic emphasis on deep underlying personality problems that must be uncovered and treated. Behavior theory is based on the belief that what is significant is not the unconscious, but rather because that can be observed and manipulated. Glick claims that behavioral theories take a diverse approach to psychoanalytic explanation. Behavioral theories do not focus on basic biological drives, children-parenting relationship, or unconscious thought drives. Behavioral theorists maintain that human behavior is developed through learning experiences. Psychologists define learning as a chain of pre-existing behavior or mental process that occurs as a result of experience. Behavioral theories argue that our behaviors are shaped by other people's reaction to us. Behaviors are constantly being shaped by life experiences and can be reinforced by rewards or eradicated through punishment. In addition, they believe that what is important is not unconscious, but behavior that can be observed and manipulated. Behavioral theorists argue that behavior is controlled by its consequences in dealing direct with behaviors that are undesirable. As such, behavioral therapy attempts to change a person's long established patterns or response to him or herself and others. According to behavioral theorists, people learn to become violent because their life experience has taught them to be aggressive. These experiences These experiences include personal observing others acting aggressively, achieving some personal goal through aggression, and watching people being rewarded for violent acts, either on television or films. Reid postulates that collectively, the learning theory and biological approach attempt to explain criminal behavior. Eysenck highlighted the interrelationship that exists between psychology and biology in explaining how people learn to behave. See previous unit. This approach advocates that individuals learn both appropriate and inappropriate behavior through process of training that involves reward for appropriate behavior, punishment for inappropriate behavior. And this conditioning is based on the work of early behavioral theorists Skinner, apparent conditioning, and Pavlov. classical condition. There are three main explanations as to how individuals learn by association. Classical condition, operant condition, social learning. Each of the three main explanations of how individuals learn by association will be unpacked starting with classic condition. Classic condition. Classic condition involves the increase or decrease of behavior through pairing and removal of stimuli. Classic condition is a learned response to stimulus and describes the process by which a learned reaction becomes automatic and internalized. Pavlov's experiment found that dogs began to salivate bell rang, when a bell rang because they knew from conditioning that the bell symbolized they would be fed. Pavlov found that after feeding his dogs following the ringing of the bell, dogs began to salivate when they heard the bell, even if food was not presented. The dog's primary or unconditioned stimulus was the food, which caused the primary psychological response. The secondary or conditioned stimulus was the ringing of the bell, which itself was not the root cause of salivation. This meant the dogs learned to salivate at the sound of the bell with or without presentation of food. Pavlov concluded that the dog's salivation was an automatic response and that they could therefore be conditioned to respond to other stimuli. According to the classical condition theory, the subject is passive and learns what to expect from the environment. The feeling of fear is an example of a response which often results from conditioned responses to pain felt early in life. As far as crime and punishment are concerned, classical condition is of legal significance since punishment by the criminal justice system does not immediately follow the criminal act. The main explanation of how individuals learn by association, namely operant conditions, are looked at next. Operant condition. Operant condition involves behavior that increases either through reinforcement or decreases through punishment. Operant condition is based on a reaction that results from an action taken. It is argued that this is the most influential form of training. Generally, behavior is influenced or reinforced by rewards. The way behavior is accepted, whether rewarded or reinforced, automatically influences appropriate behavior or inappropriate behavior. People learn by models. This means social learning occurs through either observation of how others behave or from the media. In many languages, the verb to teach is synonymous with the verb to show. Bartol and Bartol emphasizes three elements in operant learning: antecedent condition, the things that precede or trigger behavior; the behavior itself, the consequences of the behavior. Bartol emphasized that there may be many triggers for a given behavior or for a behavior to change. One may have to change the antecedent condition that trigger the behavior. A behavior that produces consequences that the individual finds rewarding and increases the frequency of that behavior is said to be reinforced. Behavior that produces consequences that the individual finds unpleasant and that therefore decrease the frequency of this behavior is said to be punished. The process of learning through consequences referred to as operant or instrumental condition. In operant condition, behavior is understood in terms of interaction between the person and the environment. The environment and the person influence each other. Environmental forces are many and diverse. For example, education, economic, the media, the legal system. In other words, operant condition is another method of learning by association. Operant learning uses rewards and punishment to reinforce or curtail certain and unconventional behaviors. Therefore, criminal behavior is largely determined by an absence of aversive consequences. The principles of classic condition and operant condition and social learning can help people to understand the role that parents, peers, and other environmental forces play in the development of a child and adolescent's behavior that may be disruptive, deviant, and eventual criminal. For example, some children may learn criminal skills by watching admired criminal role models, by being rewarded for criminal behavior, and by associating excitement and peer acceptance with criminal activity. The last of the main explanation of how individuals learn by association, namely social learning, is explored next. Social learning theory. There are several variations of learning theory, including expectancy theory, imitation or modeling, and differential association, a sociological theory discussed in theme 4. Social psychologists have framed philosophies that describe how children learn violence through socialization and how to behave in society. These socialization based theories are collectively referred as social learning theory. Albert Bandura asserted that children learn violent or aggressive behavior as they observe role models, imitate these models, and act out their roles. According to Bandura, people are not born with the capability of acting aggressively, but such behavior is learned through observation and life experiences. Although the social learning theories maintain that physical and mental characteristics contribute towards certain individuals being more susceptible towards violence, the activation of such behavior is also influenced by environmental factors. The table below illustrates the proponents of psychoanalytic and behavioral theories of crime, including their premises. Sigmund Freud, crime is as a result of overdeveloped ego. August Icon, crime is a result of an undeveloped superego. Albert Bandura, people learn aggressiveness and violent behavior through their life experiences and socialization. Okay. Social learning theory claims that behavior is reinforced not only by rewarding or punishment as an operant learning, but also by observing the behavior of others by using others as models. Psychological learning theory recognizes that individuals have psychological mechanisms that permit them to behave aggressively, but whether they will behave violently will depend on what was learned as, as the nature of their aggressive behavior. Learning theorists view consequences as factors that influence behavior. The three types of consequences are external reinforcement, including social status and punishment, various enforcements such as noting the status of others whom one observes being reinforced for their behavior, and self-regulatory mechanism such as how one responds to own action in ways that bring self-rewards or self-punishment. Learning theorists focus on the importance of family, the subculture, and media. Social learning theorists argue that people are not actually born with an inclination to act violently, but that they learn to be aggressive through their life experiences. People learn to act aggressively when, as children, they model their behavior on the violent acts of adults. Later in life, these violent behavior patterns persist in social relationships. The nature of this learning, together with the physical attributes of the offender, determines the type of crime that is carried out. As offenders become more skilled, they are better able to select more appropriate targets where they are likely to be successful and avoid detection. For example, physically slightly individuals learn that the best way to commit robbery successfully is to arm themselves. Pandora asserts that children learn violent and aggressive responses from the behavioral models. It is important to note that aggressive and violence are learned not only through interaction with others, but also in other social settings that act as learning experiences. such as presentation of violence and aggression in films and on television. Modeling theory attempts to explain that children learn by observing others and the outcomes of behavior acquired. This perspective posits that criminal behavior is acquired through learning. Children exposed to violent models tend to imitate the exact behavior. This modeling includes environmental factors that contribute to one behavioral change from the normal norm. It has been observed that people who live in areas in which violence is a daily occurrence are more likely to act violently than those who live in low crime areas where exposure to normlessness is minimal. Social theorists maintain that the following three factors may contribute to violent and or aggression behavior. Social theorists maintain that four factors that may contribute to the display of violent and aggression behavior as follows. An event that heightens arousal. An aggressive response is likely to occur if a person is provoked or frustrated. Aggressive skills. Learned aggressive response is expected if a person has been exposed to such behavior through observing others. Expected outcomes. It believed that the aggression behavior is rewarded through reduction of tension or boosting one's self-esteem. Consistency of behavior with values. The belief that aggressive behavior is justified by observing such behavior being reinforced. The importance of social learning theory lies in the fact that it views the learning of complex forms of behavior holistically rather than as a process of slow, linear condition. Social learning theory stresses the importance of normal process in the acquisition of behavior. This means that there is no need to assume some sort of pathology in people who eventually become criminals. We need to bear in mind that learning theories have not produced an individual theory of criminality. There is a little consideration of differences between the individual and no real attention is paid to the variables of gender and age. Social learning's weak ability to explain under what circumstances criminal behavior will or will not be learned by means that it has limited explanatory power. Learning theories can also be criticized for failing to account for the fact that large numbers of offenders abandoned criminal activities in early adulthood. Interesting reading. And then we're going to move to explanation of criminal behavior. Theories vary in terms of how well they predict phenomena. They all vital role to understand and predict human behavior. To decide whether theory has merit or still applies in charging society, it is imperative to evaluate it and verify if its argument is still supported. Okay, we move to cognitive theories and crime. Another type of psychological theory that has been used to explain behavior is cognitive development theory. This approach is based on the belief that the way people organize their thoughts about rules and laws resulting in earlier criminal or non criminal behavior. Psychologists refer to this organization of thought as moral reasoning. When that reasoning is applied to law, it is termed legal reasoning, although that term has a different meaning to persons trained in law. The approach stems from the early work of Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget, who believed that there are two stages in the development of moral reasoning: the belief that rules are scared and unchallengeable, and the belief that the rules are the products of humans. According to cognitive theorists, people learn not only as a result of apparent and classic condition and observation, but also through the way in which they interpret information about the world. These interpretations are guided in turn by what they attend to, perceive, think about, and remember. In short, cognitive theorists suggest that people take in, process, and decide what to do with information is crucial in whether they act in a law abiding or criminal manner. An influential cognitive theory that is particularly relevant to our understanding of criminal behavior is Lawrence Con- Kohlbeck moral development theory. Siegel found that people, from the time that they are children and continuing throughout their lifespan, go through various stages of moral development. It is during these various stages, oh, it is during these various stages their decisions are judgments about what is right and wrong are made, albeit from different reasons. According to Kochberg, serious offenders may have a moral orientation that differs significantly from that of law abiding citizens. I will stop here for now. Let us proceed. Goldberg stages of moral development. Lawrence Goldberg focused on the importance of moral and ethical reasoning. Goldberg's theory of moral development proposes a series of stages linked to children development in which moral judgments become part of a more multifaceted system of personal ethics. According to Goldberg, between the ages of 10 and 13, most people move from pre-conventional to conventional reasoning, or thinking. Of those who do not make this transition may be considered arrested in their development of moral reasoning, and they may become delinquent. Goldberg contended that there are three stages in the development of moral thinking and decision making, namely pre conventional, conventional, and post conventional reasoning. These stages were based on the children's response and explained as follows. pre-conventional level. During this stage, child's moral judgment is based on desire to avoid punishment, meaning decisions about right and wrong are based on the treatment, on the threat of punishment. For instance, a child may refrain from taking money from or his or her mother's purse because if the child is caught, the behavior will be punished. Similarly, an adult may resist the temptation to exceed the speed limit to fear for fear of being caught and fined. Conventional. As this level, at this level, the child's moral view is based on what other people will think of him or her. The child's world develops to include factors such as liking or disliking, approval or disapproval. Excuse me. At mid-adolescence, there is a shift toward considering such abstract social virtues as being a good citizen, doing one's duty, respecting authority, and maintaining the social order. Compliance to the significant others and those in authority play a critical role. Post-conventional stage. This stage is also referred to as principled level. People observe and judge the appropriateness and wrongfulness of certain acts not according to their consequences, but according to ethical principles. At first, acceptable principles defined by what is the norm or acceptable in the community, and at a later stage, the person forms his or her personal judgment and acts according to own personal principles. The development of moral reasoning does not take place in a vacuum. It depends on what is learned at home, from peers, and from society. To develop a law-abiding tendencies, children need to see patterns of moral behavior in parents and peers that is at least at a conventional stage. Research indicates that the decision not to commit crime may be influenced by one stage of moral development. People at the lowest level report that they are deterred from crime simply because of fear of punishment. Those in the middle consider the reactions of family and friends. Those at the higher stages refrain from crime because they believe in the concept of a duty to others and universal rights. Moral development theory suggests that people who obey the law simply to avoid punishment or have outlooks mainly characterized by self-interest are more likely to commit crimes than those who view the law as something that benefits everybody. Those at high stages of moral reasoning tend to sympathize with the rights of others and are associated with conventional behaviors such as honesty, generosity, and nonviolence. Evaluation of cognitive theory and crime. Research of moral reasoning of juveniles who are not offenders has supported the relevance of Kohlberg theory to our understanding of crime. Most studies have shown that young offenders operate at lower stages of moral development than non-offenders. Juveniles who commit crimes ranging from burglary to murder tend to see obedience to laws as a way of avoiding incarceration, whereas non offending youths tend to believe that one should obey laws because they prevent society from deteriorating into chaos. Studies of adult offenders have found that there, there are two they tend to operate at significantly low level of moral development than non-offenders with the same background. Activity 2.3.2 discuss behavior theories differ from psychoanalytic theory or chronological behavior. Compare the arguments for the above mentioned question under the discussion tool on my UNISA. Both the behaviorism and psychoanalysis theory developed from social and intellectual framework. Behavioral theories are developed from the Altarian school of thought and planned in such a way that it can foresee and control behavior, whereas psychoanalysis claims that everything we do is in one way or another controlled by our subconscious mind. According to the behaviorist theory, our responses to environmental stimuli shape our behavior. The behavioral theories are employed by methods that evaluate the stimulus responses relationship and its effect on behavior. While the psychoanalysis theory is divided into three parts, namely the ID, the ego, and the superego, which with the ID generally being viewed as the deepest level of unconscious that is dominated by the pleasure principle. The behavioral theories are employed by methods of evaluating the stimulus responses relationship and its effect on behavior. Conclusion. This theme examined the psychological theories of crime in psychoanalytic theory. Sigmund Freud believed that criminal behavior may be as a result of overactive superego that causes a powerful sense of guilt in an individual. August Acon, on the other hand, believed that criminality is a result of underdeveloped superego. Behavioral theorists, unlike psychoanalytic theories, assume that criminal behaviors are learned responses to social condition and life situation. Albert Bandura's social learning theory stresses that violent behavior is learned. Conditioning theories describe crime in terms of the way in which behaviors are shaped through stimulus pairing, classic condition, and reinforcement and punishment, operant condition. Skinner believed that behavior could be changed by altering environmental stimuli, reinforces punishments, whereas Pavlov found that behavior could be conditioned by pairing primary and secondary stimuli based on the famous self-deviating dog experiment. Goldberg examined how moral reasoning fluctuates as we grow old. We need to bear in mind that each stage offers new perspective. Self-assessment, I will do multiple choice questions here. Question 1. Freud believed that some people are criminal because an overdeveloped superego. Goldberg, three levels of moral development are: excuse me, I think the answer here is number three: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. The theories of criminal behavior focus on development of psycho-infant. The psychodynamic. One of the following opponents asserts that people learn aggressive. Which one of the following opponents assert that people learn aggressive and violent behavior through their life experiences and socialization? Two. Lawrence Goldberg 4. Number 4. Lawrence Goldberg. Number 5. Which theory suggests that people who obey the law simply avoid punishment are more likely to commit crimes than those who viewed the law as something that benefits everybody? One, good moral development. Okay, number 3. Okay, I'm done.